There was one rule in the galaxy: don't anger the humans. They ignored it. Commander Zakthal of the Zephyrian Empire stood before the massive holographic display in his flagship's war room, studying the spiral arm that no one talked about. The third arm of the galaxy stretched out before him like a beautiful, untouched garden. Thousands of star systems, millions of potentially habitable worlds, and all of it supposedly off-limits because of one backward species that called themselves humans. The holographic stars pulsed with different colors, indicating resource potential. The Galactic Council demanded tribute from humans. Their answer shook the stars' silence protocol. Admiral, his tactical officer, Sub-Commander Veltar, approached with obvious hesitation. The Galactic Council's response to our resource survey request has arrived. Zakthal's 4 eyes remained fixed on the display. The Zephyrians were a proud warrior race. Their blue-scaled skin and towering 8-foot frames had intimidated countless species into submission. Their empire stretched across 200 star systems, built through conquest and maintained through strength. Yet here they were, denied expansion because of some ancient treaty about creatures that most Zephyrians had never even seen. "Let me guess," Zakthal rumbled, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never accepted no as an answer. "They denied our request to explore the outer rim of human space." "Yes, sir." The council was quite firm. They referenced Treaty 847C, the Silence Protocol. Any attempt to enter human space would result in immediate expulsion from the Galactic Council and potential military action from the combined fleets. Zakthal finally turned from the display, his predatory gaze settling on Veltar. Military action from whom? The Altarians with their merchant fleet? The Centauri Collective with their research vessels? What military force could possibly threaten the Zephyrian Empire? Veltar shifted uncomfortably. Ancient warrior instincts, bred into every Zephyrian over millions of years of evolution, were telling him to be very careful with this conversation. But he also knew his commander expected honest counsel. "Sir, I've been researching the historical records. The Silence Protocol wasn't created because the humans were dangerous to us. It was created because we were dangerous to them. According to the earliest treaties, human space was declared off-limits to protect the humans from the advanced galactic civilizations." "Exactly my point," Zakthal growled, moving to another display that showed comparative military capabilities. "Look at this intelligence report. The humans have been spacefaring for barely 200 years. Their fastest ships can achieve maybe 50 times light speed, while our dreadnoughts can travel at 300 times light speed. They have primitive kinetic weapons, while we have plasma cannons and reality-warping technology. Their largest ships are maybe 2 kilometers long, while our flag vessels are 20 kilometers of pure destructive power." The commander pulled up another hologram showing human civilian populations. "Their entire species has a population of maybe 30 billion, spread across perhaps 50 worlds. The Zephyrian Empire alone has 1 trillion citizens across our conquered territories. We could overwhelm them with our merchant marine, let alone our battle fleets." Veltar accessed his personal datapad, scrolling through classified military assessments. "Sir, if I may, there are some inconsistencies in these reports that concern me." "Such as?" "Well, for instance, the data suggests that humans have only 50 worlds, but our long-range sensors have detected artificial structures around nearly every star in their territory. That's over 8,000 systems. Either they have mining outposts and habitats we don't understand, or our intelligence is severely flawed." Zakthal dismissed this with a wave of his clawed hand. "Automated facilities, obviously. Primitive robots managing resource extraction. It actually proves my point. They have all that infrastructure just waiting for a superior race to take control of it." The holographic display shifted to show the Galactic Council chambers, a massive space station where representatives from 500 species gathered to maintain galactic law. The Zephyrian delegation held 47 votes, making them one of the most powerful voices in the council. Yet even with all that political weight, their request to survey human space had been denied unanimously. Not a single species had supported them. "I want to understand something," Zakthal said, his voice taking on the dangerous tone that his officers had learned to fear. "The council records show that the humans were contacted exactly once, 3,000 years ago. One diplomatic mission, one brief exchange, and, then, immediate implementation of the silence protocol. What happened during that contact? Veltar's scales darkened, an involuntary response to stress. The records are classified at the highest levels, sir. Even with my security clearance, I can only access summary documents. And, what do those summaries say? They're quite brief. The contact mission was led by the Centauri Collective, back when they were the dominant military power in the galaxy. They sent their most advanced diplomatic vessel with a full first contact team. The mission lasted exactly 47 minutes. 47 minutes to establish galactic law? That seems efficient. Yes, sir. The summary simply states that after the initial contact, the Centauri representative immediately transmitted a Priority 1 emergency signal to the Galactic Council, recommending the immediate implementation of a non-contact protocol. The motion was passed within hours, with zero opposition. Zakthal moved to a tactical display showing his own fleet. 12 dreadnoughts, 40 battlecruisers, 200 support vessels, and over 50,000 of the finest warriors the Zephyrian Empire had ever produced. Each ship was a masterwork of military engineering, incorporating technology developed over millions of years by dozens of advanced civilizations. Veltar, I want you to imagine that you're a Centauri diplomat, 3,000 years ago. You've just made contact with a primitive, barely spacefaring species. What could possibly happen in 47 minutes that would make you so terrified that you'd convince the entire galaxy to avoid them forever? I honestly cannot imagine, sir. Neither can I. Which leads me to believe that either our ancestors were cowards, or they vastly overreacted to some minor cultural misunderstanding. Zakthal's voice grew stronger with conviction. Think about it logically. What's the worst thing a primitive species could possibly do? Show us crude weapons? Threaten us with their tiny ships? Make demands they have no power to enforce? The commander activated a secure communication channel to his fleet admirals. Admiral Mordisk, Admiral Gentel, Admiral Kretos, report to the war room immediately. We're about to make history. While waiting for his senior staff, Zakthal continued studying the intelligence reports. According to every analysis, the humans were a Class 7 civilization, barely capable of interstellar travel, with no advanced weapons technology, no reality manipulation capabilities, and no significant military infrastructure. They didn't even appear to have a unified planetary government on most of their worlds. Sir, Veltar said quietly, I feel obligated to point out that the Galactic Council's response included a personal message from Supreme Chancellor Valdris. He used the phrase catastrophic consequences 3 times in a single paragraph. Valdris is a Centauri. His people have controlled the Council for 2 millennia by convincing everyone else that they're the wise, cautious leaders of galactic civilization. Of course he'd oppose any action that might challenge their authority. The war room doors slid open, and Zakthal's 3 fleet admirals entered. Each was a veteran of dozens of campaigns, with combined military experience spanning over 6 centuries. Admiral Mordisk had conquered the Theta Sector, Admiral Gentel had broken the Regelian Alliance, and Admiral Kretos had forced the surrender of the entire vegan star system. Gentlemen, Zakthal addressed them, I've called you here to discuss a matter of imperial strategy. How long would it take this fleet to subjugate a Class 7 civilization with approximately 50 worlds and no significant military capability? Admiral Mordisk consulted his tactical database. Assuming standard resistance patterns, perhaps 2 months, sir. Most of that would be travel time between systems. And if we encountered unexpected resistance? 6 months, maximum, Admiral Gental added. A Class 7 civilization simply doesn't have the technology base to mount an effective defense against our fleet. Admiral Kretos, the most conservative of the 3, frowned thoughtfully. Sir, are we discussing the human territories? Because if so, I feel I should mention that I've reviewed the Council's historical files. The language used to describe the necessity of the silence protocol is unusually strong. Meaning? Meaning that in 3,000 years of galactic politics, I've never seen the Council use terms like existential threat or species survival when referring to a first contact situation. The humans are described as if they were some kind of natural disaster, not a spacefaring civilization. Zachthal's expression grew more determined. Which proves my point exactly. Our ancestors let fear of the unknown create a mythology around these creatures. 3,000 years of isolation has turned them into galactic bogeymen, when the reality is they're probably just another primitive species struggling to understand technologies that we mastered millions of years ago. The commander activated a new display showing recent deep space reconnaissance data. Our long-range sensors have detected something interesting in the past few weeks. There's been a significant increase in artificial transmissions from human space. Radio waves, basic encryption, what appears to be commercial traffic. Commercial traffic suggests economic activity, Admiral Mordisk observed. Which suggests population growth and industrial expansion. Exactly. They're growing, expanding, building. In another 1,000 years, they might actually become a legitimate competitor for galactic resources. But, right now, today, they're still vulnerable. Veltar cleared his throat nervously. Sir, I should mention that our intelligence also indicates the humans have been monitoring galactic communications. They know about the silence protocol. Of course they do, Zachthal laughed. They probably think it's the greatest joke in the galaxy. An entire civilization afraid to contact them because of some ancient misunderstanding. Admiral Gentel pulled up fleet deployment schedules. Commander, if you're seriously considering an expedition into human space, I should point out that we'd be in direct violation of galactic law. The Council would demand our immediate withdrawal and would likely impose severe sanctions. The Council will protest, threaten, and ultimately do nothing, Zachthal replied confidently. The Zephyrian Empire controls too much of the galaxy's military manufacturing and rare element extraction for them to risk a real confrontation with us. They'll make noise, but they won't act. And if they do act? Admiral Kretus asked. Then, we'll have a war with the Galactic Council. But we'll also have the resources of human space to fund that war. 8,000 systems worth of untapped wealth should be more than enough to guarantee our victory. The room fell silent as the admirals considered the implications. Each had built their careers on successful military campaigns, but each also understood that what their commander was proposing would fundamentally change the balance of galactic power. Sir, Veltar said slowly, I have one more piece of information that you should consider before making this decision. I managed to access one additional piece of data from the original contact mission. Go on. The Centauri diplomatic vessel that made first contact with the humans? It was the CSV Enlightenment, their most advanced ship at the time. According to the records, it never returned to Centauri space. Zachthal's eyes narrowed. What happened to it? The official report states that it suffered catastrophic system failure and was lost in hyperspace. But the interesting thing is that the emergency transmission recommending the silence protocol was sent 47 minutes after initial contact, while the ship's destruction wasn't reported until 3 hours later. So the ship was functional when they recommended avoiding human contact, but was destroyed afterwards? Yes, sir. The timeline suggests that whatever convinced the Centauri to recommend isolation happened first, and the destruction of their ship happened as a separate incident. Admiral Mordisk studied the tactical implications. That could mean any number of things. Equipment failure, natural disaster, enemy action from some other species. Or, Admiral Kretus said quietly, it could mean that the humans destroyed the ship after the diplomatic contact was completed. Zachthal considered this possibility for a moment, then dismissed it. Even if that's true, so what? A primitive species destroyed one ship with technology they probably don't understand or can't reproduce. That was 3,000 years ago. Today, my fleet could glass every human world in their territory without suffering a single casualty. The commander made his decision. Admirals, prepare the fleet for departure. We're going to settle this question once and for all. The Zephyrian Empire is going to make contact with the humans, and we're going to show the galaxy that there's nothing to fear from a species that hasn't evolved beyond kinetic weapons and chemical rockets. Sir, Veltar said urgently, I really must insist that you reconsider. The risk-to-reward ratio of this mission seems heavily skewed toward risk. The only risk, Zachthal replied firmly, is that we'll be known as the species that finally broke 3,000 years of superstition and fear. History will remember the Zephyrian Empire as the civilization that had the courage to do what everyone else was too frightened to attempt. As his officers left to begin preparations, Zachthal remained in the war room, staring at the holographic display of human space. Somewhere out there, in those forbidden star systems, was a primitive species that had accidentally become the galaxy's greatest mystery. Soon, he would solve that mystery and claim the greatest prize in galactic history. He had absolutely no idea that across the galaxy, automated monitoring stations were already detecting his fleet's preparations. Deep in human space, ancient warning systems that had been dormant for 3 millennia were beginning to activate. And, on a small, blue world called Earth, someone was finally answering a question that had been asked exactly once, 3,000 years ago: what happens if someone doesn't follow the rule? The answer was about to reshape the galaxy. The Zephyrian Armada moved through hyperspace like a silver spear thrust into the heart of the unknown. 12 massive dreadnoughts, each one a floating city of destruction, led the formation. Behind them, 40 battlecruisers maintained perfect spacing, their hulls bristling with enough firepower to reduce planets to cosmic dust. The support fleet followed in their wake: carriers, supply ships, troop transports, and specialized vessels designed for planetary occupation and resource extraction. Commander Zachthal stood on the bridge of his flagship, the ZS Dominator, watching the swirling colors of hyperspace flow past the massive viewports. The ship was 23 kilometers of advanced engineering, housing 50,000 crew members and carrying enough weaponry to level continents. It was a monument to Zephyrian military might, and it was just one of 12 identical vessels in his fleet. "Fleet status report," he commanded. All vessels maintaining formation. Admiral Mordisk responded from his position at the tactical station. "We'll reach the edge of human space in approximately 6 hours. Any response from the Galactic Council?" Admiral Gentile consulted her communications display. 17 different species have filed formal protests with the Council. The Centauri Collective has declared our mission an act of unprecedented recklessness. The Altarian Federation is threatening economic sanctions. Even the minor species are voicing opposition. "Let them protest," Zachthal growled. "When we return with proof that the humans are just another primitive civilization, the Council will thank us for ending 3 millennia of unnecessary fear." Subcommander Veltar approached with a datapad, his scales showing the dark coloration that indicated deep concern. "Sir, our intelligence division has completed their analysis of human communication intercepts. The findings are unusual." "Define unusual." "Well, sir, the linguistic analysis suggests that humans use approximately 7,000 different languages across their territory. Our xenolinguistics experts say that level of linguistic diversity typically indicates either a very young civilization that hasn't had time to develop universal communication, or what? Or a civilization so old and established that they've deliberately maintained cultural diversity across vast populations. The mathematical models suggest that achieving 7,000 stable languages requires either a 500-year-old civilization with no central authority, or a civilization that's been stable for over 50,000 years. Zachthal considered this information. The Zephyrian Empire, like most galactic civilizations, had unified around a single language within a few thousand years of achieving interstellar travel. Maintaining multiple languages was inefficient, leading to communication errors and cultural fragmentation. For a species to deliberately preserve thousands of languages suggested either extreme primitiveness or something else entirely. What's the intelligence division's conclusion? They believe the humans are primitives, sir. The linguistic diversity, combined with their apparently low technology level, suggests they're essentially a collection of tribal societies that happen to have stumbled onto basic spaceflight. Admiral Kretas looked up from his strategic planning station. "If that's true, then subjugation should be even easier than we anticipated. Tribal societies rarely coordinate effective resistance against unified military forces." The bridge's main display activated, showing a real-time tactical map of the approaching human territory. The border was clearly defined by a series of automated beacon stations that had been broadcasting the same message for 3,000 years: this space is claimed by humanity. Approach is forbidden under Galactic Treaty 847C. Violators will be held responsible for consequences. Simple, direct, and utterly ineffective, Zachthal observed. They don't even threaten violence. Just consequences. What kind of military force announces its intentions with such weak language? Permission to speak freely, sir? Veltar asked. Granted. I've been thinking about the historical timeline. 3,000 years ago, when the Silence Protocol was established, the humans had just achieved interstellar travel. But they've had 3 millennia to develop their technology and expand their civilization. Even if they started as primitives, they've had enough time to become genuinely dangerous. Admiral Gentile pulled up comparative technological development charts. Actually, Subcommander, our analysis suggests the opposite. Based on the radio transmissions we've intercepted, human technology appears to have advanced very slowly. They're still using primitive electromagnetic communications, their ships still appear to rely on chemical propulsion for local maneuvering, and we've detected no evidence of reality manipulation technology or exotic matter weapons. Which proves they're still essentially where they were 3,000 years ago, Zachthal concluded. A spacefaring civilization, but barely. They've had 3 millennia to become a threat, and they've remained primitive. That suggests they've reached their technological ceiling. The fleet continued its approach toward the human border. As they traveled, the Intelligence Division maintained constant monitoring of human communications. The data they collected painted a picture of a civilization that seemed almost deliberately backward. Sir, the communications officer reported, we're detecting increased chatter from human space. It appears they're aware of our approach. Put it on speakers. The bridge filled with the sound of human voices speaking in various languages. The universal translators struggled with the complexity, providing fragmented translations. Unidentified fleet approaching Sector 7. Council protocols are in effect. Notify the Admiralty immediately. This is not a drill. They sound almost calm, Admiral Mordisk observed. Most primitive species would be broadcasting panic signals by now. Zachthal nodded. Probably because they don't understand the magnitude of the force approaching them. When you've never seen a real military fleet, you can't appreciate the difference between our dreadnoughts and whatever pathetic vessels they call warships. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of human territory, exactly 1 light hour from the nearest human outpost. The transition from the swirling chaos of hyperspace to the stark beauty of normal space was always dramatic, but this time it carried extra significance. The Zephyrian Armada was the first non-human military force to enter this region of space in 3,000 years. Full sensor sweep, Admiral Gentile ordered. I want to know everything about this system before we proceed. The massive sensor arrays of the dreadnoughts began their work, sending out detection beams that could analyze the composition of a planet from billions of kilometers away. The data that came back was immediately puzzling. Sir, the sensor officer reported, I'm detecting artificial structures throughout this system. Not just on the planets, but built into asteroids, floating in empty space, even constructed around the system's star. Automated mining facilities, Admiral Mordisk suggested. Consistent with a primitive civilization that relies heavily on robotic labor. The scale is unprecedented, though, the sensor officer continued. We're detecting what appears to be a solid ring of artificial structures around the system's primary star. The energy output suggests massive industrial capacity. Zachthal studied the sensor displays with growing interest. A Dyson ring, an artificial structure built around a star to capture its energy output, was a massive undertaking even for advanced galactic civilizations. The Zephyrian Empire had constructed partial rings around 3 stars, but building a complete ring required resources and engineering capabilities that most species took millions of years to develop. Could the ring be natural? He asked. Negative, sir. The materials are clearly artificial, and the geometric precision is perfect. This was definitely constructed. How long would it take to build something like that? The engineering officer consulted his databases. Using our most advanced construction techniques, probably 8 to 10,000 years, sir. And that's assuming unlimited resources and a massive workforce. Veltar's scales darkened further. Sir, if the humans built that ring, they're not primitives. The engineering knowledge required for that kind of construction suggests a highly advanced industrial civilization. Or, Admiral Kretus interjected, they found an abandoned alien structure and moved in. The galaxy is full of artifacts left behind by extinct civilizations. This explanation satisfied Zakthal. Ancient alien artifacts were common throughout galactic space. Many civilizations had built their early technology base by reverse engineering abandoned structures. It made sense that the humans had simply been lucky enough to find a particularly impressive relic. Continue the sensor sweep, he ordered. I want to know what kind of defenses they have before we announce our presence. The sensor data continued to flow in, and it painted an increasingly confusing picture. The human system was densely populated with artificial structures, but none of them appeared to be military installations. There were massive industrial complexes, what appeared to be residential habitats scattered throughout the asteroid belt, and transportation networks that defied easy analysis. Sir, I'm detecting movement throughout the system, the sensor officer reported. Thousands of vessels, ranging from small personal craft to ships several kilometers in length. The traffic patterns suggest a highly organized transportation network. Military vessels? Unknown, sir. They don't match any configuration in our databases, and our sensors can't penetrate their hulls to determine their capabilities. Admiral Gentile frowned at her displays. That's unusual. Our sensors can analyze the internal structure of most known ship designs. Either these vessels are built from materials we're unfamiliar with, or they're using some kind of sensor shielding technology. Advanced stealth capabilities would suggest military applications, Admiral Mordisk observed. Or, Zakthal countered, their construction techniques are so primitive that their ships accidentally interfere with our sensors. Crude materials and poor engineering often produce unexpected electromagnetic effects. A new contact appeared on the tactical display, moving toward their position at high speed. The object was relatively small, perhaps 500 meters in length, but it was approaching at a velocity that was impressive even by galactic standards. Incoming vessel, the tactical officer announced. Time to intercept, approximately 30 minutes. Battle stations? No, sir. It appears to be a single, unarmed vessel. Probably a diplomatic courier. Zakthal settled into his command chair with satisfaction. Perfect. They're sending a representative to negotiate. This is exactly how first contact should proceed. The primitives acknowledge the superiority of the advanced civilization and request terms for peaceful coexistence. The approaching human vessel was unlike anything in the Zephyrian databases. Its design was sleek and organic, almost grown rather than built. There were no obvious weapon ports, no military sensors, no defensive shields. It looked like exactly what it was supposed to be, a peaceful diplomatic vessel. Sir, the human ship is transmitting, the communications officer reported. Put it through. The voice that emerged from the speakers was calm, professional, and spoke in perfect Zephyrian. Zephyrian fleet, this is Captain Sarachin of the Human Diplomatic Corps vessel messenger. I'm here to discuss your presence in human space. The perfect pronunciation of their language caught everyone off guard. Learning to speak Zephyrian properly typically required years of study and specialized vocal modifications. For a human to speak it so fluently suggested either extensive preparation or advanced translation technology. This is Commander Zakthal of the Zephyrian Empire, he responded. We're here to establish formal contact with your species and discuss the integration of human territory into our sphere of influence. There was a brief pause before Captain Chen responded. I see. May I come aboard your vessel to discuss this matter? I believe there are some aspects of the situation that require explanation. Zakthal smiled. The human was being remarkably cooperative. Most primitive species required threats and demonstrations of power before they agreed to negotiate. Permission granted, Captain Chen. Dock with our primary landing bay. As the human vessel approached the massive Zephyrian dreadnought, Veltar noticed something that made his blood run cold. The small human ship was maintaining perfect formation with their flagship despite the complex gravitational fields generated by such a massive vessel. The precision required for that kind of maneuvering suggested piloting skills and sensor technology that rivaled their own. "Sir," he said quietly, "that level of precision flying typically requires either highly advanced AI systems or pilots with decades of experience in military-grade vessels. Probably computer assistants," Zakthal dismissed. "Even primitive species can develop adequate navigation software given enough time." The human ship docked with mechanical precision, its boarding tube aligning perfectly with the dreadnought's airlock. Within minutes, Captain Chen was escorted to the main conference room by a squad of Zephyrian guards. She was smaller than expected, barely reaching the chest height of an average Zephyrian, with the typical pale skin and fragile bone structure of her species. She wore a simple blue uniform with minimal decoration, and carried no visible weapons. Everything about her appearance reinforced the image of humans as a primitive, peaceful species. "Captain Chen," Zakthal greeted her as she entered the conference room. "Welcome aboard the Dominator. I trust your journey was comfortable?" "Very much so, thank you," she replied, her voice carrying no trace of fear or intimidation. "Commander Zakthal, before we begin our discussions, I feel obligated to inform you that your presence here violates several galactic treaties and puts both our species in a very difficult position." "The only treaty at issue is the Silence Protocol," Zakthal replied confidently. "And that treaty was based on outdated information and excessive caution. Times change, Captain. The galaxy is ready for a new relationship with humanity." Captain Chen sat in the chair provided for her, looking completely comfortable despite being surrounded by 8-foot-tall alien warriors in the heart of a massive warship. Her calmness was either remarkable courage or complete naivety. "Commander, may I ask what your intentions are regarding human space?" "Nothing unreasonable," Zakthal assured her. "The Zephyrian Empire is prepared to offer humanity protection, advanced technology, and integration into galactic civilization. In exchange, we would require access to your territory's resources and the establishment of Zephyrian administrative oversight on your worlds." "I see. And if humanity declines this offer?" "I'm confident that won't be necessary. Once your leaders understand the benefits of joining our empire, they'll recognize that cooperation is in everyone's best interests." Captain Chen nodded thoughtfully. "Commander, I appreciate your directness. However, I think there may be some fundamental misunderstandings about the current situation that we should address before you commit to any particular course of action." "Such as?" "Well, for instance, you seem to believe that humanity is a primitive civilization that would benefit from your protection and guidance. That assessment is based on intelligence that is both incomplete and somewhat outdated." Admiral Mordisk leaned forward aggressively. "Our intelligence indicates that your species has barely achieved interstellar travel, possesses no advanced weapons technology, and maintains a fragmentary political structure." "Are you claiming this analysis is incorrect?" "I'm suggesting," Captain Chen said calmly, "that there might be more to the situation than your sensors have detected. For example, did your analysis account for the possibility that we might not want to be detected?" The room fell silent. Veltar felt a chill run down his spine as the implications of her words began to sink in. If the humans had been deliberately concealing their true capabilities, then everything they thought they knew about the situation might be wrong. "Captain Chen," Zakthal said slowly, "are you suggesting that humanity is more advanced than our intelligence indicates?" She smiled, and, for the first time, there was something in her expression that looked almost predatory. "Commander, I'm suggesting that in about 5 minutes, you're going to understand exactly why the galaxy created the Silence Protocol 3,000 years ago, and why everyone except the Zephyrian Empire was smart enough to follow it." The conference room aboard the ZES Dominator fell into an uncomfortable silence as Captain Chen's words hung in the air like a death sentence. Commander Zakthal studied the small human female with growing unease, searching her expression for signs of bluffing or deception. What he found instead was the calm confidence of someone who held all the cards in a game that everyone else was still learning to play. "Captain Chen," he said carefully, "I think you may be overestimating your species' capabilities. My fleet represents the combined might of the Zephyrian Empire. We have 12 dreadnoughts, each capable of destroying planets, and enough firepower to level every installation in this system. I'm sure you do, she replied pleasantly. Your ships are quite impressive. We've been watching them since they entered our space. Admiral Gentile looked up sharply from her tactical display. Watching them? Our sensors haven't detected any monitoring systems. No, I don't imagine they have. Captain Chen reached into her uniform and withdrew a small device that looked like nothing more than a simple communication tablet. Commander, would you mind if I showed you something? I think it might help clarify the current situation. Zakthal nodded, though his hand instinctively moved closer to his sidearm. The human activated her device, and, suddenly, the conference room's holographic displays came alive with information that definitely hadn't been there moments before. This is impossible, Admiral Mordisk breathed, staring at his tactical screens. Our systems are completely isolated from external networks. There's no way you could be accessing our computers. Captain Chen glanced at the displays with casual interest. Oh, these aren't your computers, Admiral. These are our computers. We've been quietly upgrading your systems since you entered human space. Think of it as a courtesy, we wanted to make sure you had access to accurate information. The holographic displays now showed a three-dimensional tactical map that was far more detailed than anything the Zephyrian sensors had produced. Every ship in the human system was clearly visible, along with detailed specifications for their size, speed, and capabilities. What the map revealed made Veltar's scales turn completely black with terror. By the ancestors, he whispered. There are thousands of them. The tactical display showed not dozens of human vessels, as their sensors had originally detected, but thousands. Ships ranging from small fighters to massive vessels that dwarfed even the Zephyrian dreadnoughts moved throughout the system in complex patterns. What had appeared to be a lightly defended frontier system was actually one of the most heavily militarized regions of space any of them had ever seen. How is this possible? Admiral Kretas demanded. Our sensors are the most advanced in the galaxy. We would have detected these vessels. Your sensors are indeed impressive, Captain Chen agreed. Unfortunately, they're designed to detect ships that want to be detected. Our vessels have been using stealth technology that renders them essentially invisible to conventional sensors. Commander Zakthal studied the tactical display with growing alarm. Even if every ship shown was primitive by Zephyrian standards, the sheer number of them would make any military engagement extremely costly. But there was something else about the display that bothered him even more than the fleet size. Captain, these formation patterns, they're not random. This is a coordinated defensive grid. Very good, Commander. Yes, you've stumbled into what we call a reception system. We maintain several dozen of them along our borders, specifically designed to welcome unexpected visitors. Admiral Gentile ran calculations on her personal computer. Even with their numbers, the tactical advantage still favors us. Our weapons technology is centuries ahead of anything they could have developed. Captain Chen tilted her head thoughtfully. Admiral, what makes you think our weapons technology is primitive? Your ships show no evidence of plasma cannons, reality manipulation weaponry, or exotic matter systems. Our intelligence indicates you're still using kinetic projectiles and chemical explosives. We do use kinetic projectiles, Captain Chen confirmed. We found them to be remarkably effective when properly applied. She touched her device again, and the tactical display zoomed in on one of the larger human vessels. The ship was massive, easily 15 kilometers in length, but its hull appeared to be smooth and featureless, with no obvious weapon systems. This is the HDF Righteous Fury, one of our standard battleships. Admiral Gentile, you mentioned kinetic weapons. Would you like to see a demonstration? Before anyone could respond, the display showed the human vessel adjusting its position slightly. There was no visible muzzle flash, no energy discharge, no indication that anything had been fired. But, suddenly, a small asteroid several million kilometers away simply ceased to exist. What just happened? Zakthal demanded. The righteous Fury fired a single kinetic projectile at approximately 98% of light speed, Captain Chen explained casually. The round was roughly the size of a grain of rice, but, at that velocity, it carries more destructive energy than most fusion bombs. The conference room fell silent as the implications sank in. A weapon that could accelerate tiny projectiles to near light speed would be essentially unstoppable by conventional defenses. No shield technology in the galaxy could deflect something moving that fast, and the kinetic energy alone would be devastating. How is that possible? Veltar asked quietly. Linear accelerators, Captain Chen replied. We build them into the hull structure of our ships. They're not particularly complicated, just very, very long. The Righteous Fury's main gun is actually the entire length of the ship, 14 kilometers of electromagnetic acceleration. Admiral Mordisk studied the tactical display with new appreciation for what he was seeing. The smooth hull design, those ships aren't unarmed. They're actually giant weapons. Every human vessel is designed around its primary armament, Captain Chen confirmed. We learned a long time ago that in space warfare, there's no such thing as armor that can't be penetrated and no shield that can't be overwhelmed. So we focused on making sure our enemies never get the chance to use their defenses. Commander Zakthal felt the first real stirrings of doubt about his mission. The humans were clearly more advanced than his intelligence had indicated, but even advanced weapons meant nothing if they could be overwhelmed by superior numbers and tactics. Captain Chen, your weapons may be impressive, but warfare is about more than individual ship capabilities. Coordination, strategy, logistics, these are the factors that determine victory. You're absolutely right, she agreed. Which brings me to another aspect of the situation you might find interesting. The tactical display shifted to show the entire human star system, but now it included information that made Admiral Kretus actually gasp in shock. The system wasn't just defended by thousands of ships, it was defended by hundreds of thousands of automated platforms, orbital weapons systems, and installations that turned every planet, moon, and asteroid into a potential military asset. This entire system is a fortress, Admiral Gentel breathed. This entire system is one fortress among thousands, Captain Chen corrected. Commander Zakthal, your intelligence suggested that humanity controls approximately 50 worlds. That number is slightly off. She touched her device again, and the display expanded to show human territory in its entirety. The revelation was staggering. Instead of 50 worlds, the map showed human control extending across nearly a quarter of the galaxy. Thousands of star systems, millions of worlds, and a defensive network that spanned distances so vast that conventional military thinking simply couldn't comprehend them. This is impossible, Zakthal said flatly. The galactic surveys would have detected this level of expansion. The galactic surveys detected exactly what we wanted them to detect, Captain Chen replied. Commander, 3,000 years ago, your predecessor species made contact with humanity. That contact lasted exactly 47 minutes, after which they recommended the immediate implementation of the silence protocol. Would you like to know what happened during those 47 minutes? The room was completely silent. Everyone present understood that they were about to learn something that would fundamentally change their understanding of galactic politics. The Centauri diplomatic vessel approached one of our border systems and requested peaceful contact. We agreed, and invited them to send a representative to one of our stations. Their ambassador was treated with complete courtesy and respect. We showed him our culture, our technology, our achievements. We answered all his questions honestly and completely. Captain Chen paused, her expression growing more serious. And then, we asked him a single question in return: what would you do if your species was threatened with extinction? The Centauri ambassador gave us the standard diplomatic answer about defensive measures and proportional responses. So we showed him what we would do. Admiral Mordisk leaned forward despite himself. Which was? We showed him our military doctrine. We explained how humanity approaches warfare when the survival of our species is at stake. We described our contingency plans, our strategic reserves, and our approach to total warfare. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. The Centauri ambassador listened to our briefing for exactly 37 minutes. Then, he thanked us for our honesty, returned to his ship, and immediately transmitted an emergency message to the Galactic Council recommending that humanity be left completely alone for the safety of everyone else in the galaxy. Commander Zakthal found his voice with difficulty. What exactly did you tell him? Captain Chen's smile was no longer pleasant. We told him that if humanity was ever threatened with extinction, we would ensure that we didn't face that fate alone. We explained our dead hand protocol, the automated systems that would guarantee that anyone who destroyed humanity would immediately face the complete annihilation of their own species. You threatened to commit genocide? Admiral Kretus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. We didn't threaten anything, Captain Chen replied calmly. We simply explained our defensive philosophy. If someone tries to exterminate humanity, we will exterminate them in return. If someone tries to conquer us, we will conquer them. If someone brings a knife to the fight, we will bring a gun. If they bring a gun, we will bring a nuclear weapon. If they bring a nuclear weapon, we will bring something that makes nuclear weapons look like children's toys. The tactical display shifted again, showing what appeared to be massive structures positioned throughout human space. The objects were enormous, each one larger than most space stations, and they were clearly artificial. These are antimatter production facilities, Captain Chen explained. We currently maintain approximately 50,000 of them, each one capable of producing enough antimatter to sterilize an entire star system. They're automated, self-repairing, and completely autonomous. Admiral Gentel stared at the display in horror. 50,000 antimatter factories? The energy output alone would be detectable across the galaxy. Not if you build them inside black holes, Captain Chen said matter-of-factly. We've found that event horizons provide excellent concealment for industrial operations. The revelation that humans had somehow learned to build industrial facilities inside black holes was so absurd that Veltar almost laughed. Then, he realized that if they were telling the truth, it meant humanity had mastered technology that was beyond anything the galactic civilizations had ever achieved. But, the Dead Hand Protocol is just one aspect of our defensive strategy, Captain Chen continued. We also maintain what we call the mutual destruction doctrine. If any species attacks humanity, we don't just defend ourselves, we immediately attack every military target that species possesses, regardless of where it is in the galaxy. Commander Zakthal felt the blood drain from his face. You're saying that if my fleet attacks you, you would respond by attacking the Zephyrian Empire itself? Oh no, Commander. If your fleet attacks us, we would respond by attacking every Zephyrian military installation, every Zephyrian government facility, and every Zephyrian world simultaneously. We don't believe in proportional responses. The tactical display now showed the Zephyrian Empire's home territory, complete with detailed information about military installations, government centers, and population concentrations. The level of intelligence was so comprehensive that it could only mean one thing. You've been watching us, Admiral Mordisk said slowly. For how long? Since the day your species achieved interstellar travel, Captain Chen replied. We watch everyone. We know the location of every military facility, every government installation, and every strategic resource in the territory of every species that has ever achieved spaceflight. We know your defensive capabilities, your industrial capacity, your population distributions, and your strategic weaknesses. Why? Zakthal asked. Because knowledge is the ultimate weapon, Commander. And, because the best way to ensure that we never have to use our defensive capabilities is to make sure that everyone understands exactly what those capabilities are. Captain Chen stood up, her diminutive stature somehow making her more intimidating rather than less. Commander Zakthal, you brought 12 dreadnoughts into human space because you believed we were primitive and helpless. You were operating under the assumption that you could overwhelm us through superior technology and numbers. But, here's what you didn't understand, we've been preparing for this conversation for 3,000 years. We knew that eventually, someone would decide to test the silence protocol. We've been waiting for you. The conference room's displays shifted one final time, showing real-time tactical information about the Zephyrian fleet. Every ship was highlighted, with detailed information about its weapons, defenses, crew complement, and strategic value. Your fleet is currently surrounded by approximately 40,000 human vessels, all armed with weapons systems that could destroy your ships faster than your sensors could detect the incoming fire. Your home territory is currently being observed by monitoring stations that could coordinate a simultaneous strike against every Zephyrian military asset in the galaxy. Your Empire's strategic weaknesses have been analyzed, catalogued, and incorporated into battle plans that have been refined and updated for centuries. She paused, letting the implications sink in. Now, Commander, knowing all of this, would you still like to discuss the integration of human territory into your sphere of influence? The silence in the conference room stretched for what felt like an eternity. Commander Zakthal stared at the tactical displays surrounding him, his mind struggling to process the magnitude of what he was seeing. Every assumption that had guided his decision to invade human space had been not just wrong, but catastrophically wrong. The humans hadn't been hiding because they were weak. They'd been hiding because they were so overwhelmingly powerful that their very existence represented a threat to every other species in the galaxy. Captain Chen, he said finally, his voice lacking its earlier confidence, are you saying that humanity has been capable of destroying galactic civilization for 3,000 years? Not destroying, she corrected gently. We prefer the term defensive deterrence. We've never wanted to harm anyone, Commander. We just wanted to be left alone to develop our civilization in peace. The silence protocol was the galaxy's way of ensuring that mutual coexistence remained possible. Admiral Gentel looked up from her displays, her expression showing a mixture of fear and professional admiration. Captain, the level of strategic preparation you're describing would require resources and coordination on a scale that's almost incomprehensible. How did your species manage to build this kind of infrastructure without anyone noticing? Time, patience, and very careful planning, Captain Chen replied. 3,000 years is a long time, Admiral. Long enough to hollow out asteroids, build industrial complexes inside gas giants, and construct manufacturing facilities in the empty space between star systems. When you have unlimited time and you don't want to be detected, you can accomplish remarkable things. Veltar's scales had shifted to the deepest black possible, indicating a level of fear that was approaching panic. But the resources required, the energy costs alone would be astronomical. Not if you're harvesting energy directly from stellar cores, Captain Chen explained. We discovered a long time ago that stars are remarkably inefficient at converting matter to energy. We developed techniques for improving that efficiency. The implications of that casual statement made Admiral Kretas actually step backward. You're manipulating stellar fusion? That would require technology so advanced that most species would consider it godlike. We prefer to think of it as good engineering, Captain Chen said with a slight smile. When you have 3,000 years to work on a problem, you tend to find solutions. Commander Zakthal forced himself to focus on tactical realities rather than the overwhelming scope of human capabilities. Captain, assuming everything you've told us is true, what exactly are you proposing? Are you demanding our immediate surrender? Nothing so dramatic, she replied. I'm simply suggesting that you might want to reconsider your original plan. The Zephyrian Empire invaded human space with the intention of conquest and resource extraction. Now that you understand the actual situation, perhaps we can discuss more mutually beneficial arrangements. Such as? Captain Chen touched her device again, and the display shifted to show what appeared to be trade routes and economic data. The human economy is quite large, Commander. We produce goods and services that might be of interest to other galactic civilizations. We're also in need of certain resources that are more efficiently obtained through trade than through conquest. Admiral Mordisk studied the economic data with growing amazement. These production figures, if they're accurate, the human economy is larger than the rest of the galaxy combined. Automation is wonderful, Captain Chen observed. When you have unlimited energy and 3,000 years to build manufacturing infrastructure, you can produce quite a lot of things. The trade data showed industrial output on a scale that dwarfed anything the galactic civilizations had achieved. starship construction, advanced materials, quantum computers, exotic matter, and technologies that most species considered theoretical were being produced in quantities that could supply the needs of hundreds of civilizations.
You're offering to trade with us? Admiral Kretus asked.
We're offering to trade with everyone, Captain Chen corrected. The silence protocol prevented us from participating in galactic commerce, but we've been watching and learning. We know what other species need, and we know what we can provide. Commander Zakthal studied the trade proposals with a mixture of suspicion and growing interest. The humans were offering technology and resources that could revolutionize Zephyrian civilization. Advanced manufacturing techniques that could triple their industrial output, energy production methods that could power their entire empire using a fraction of current resources, and defensive technologies that could make their worlds virtually impregnable.
What would you want in return?
Cultural exchange, Captain Chen said simply. Art, music, literature, philosophy.
We've been isolated for 3,000 years, Commander.
We've missed out on the cultural development of hundreds of civilizations.
We're interested in learning about the galaxy's achievements in areas that don't involve warfare or conquest.
The proposal was so unexpectedly benign that it caught everyone off guard. After demonstrating military capabilities that could devastate galactic civilization, the humans were asking for nothing more than cultural exchange.
That's all?
Veltar asked.
You could demand anything you wanted from us.
Tribute, resources, territory.
You're asking for art and music?
We have all the resources we need, Captain Chen replied.
We have all the territory we want.
What we don't have is diversity of thought and cultural experience. The Zephyrian Empire has developed unique approaches to engineering, architecture, and social organization.
We'd be interested in learning about them. Admiral Gentel looked up from her analysis of the trade data.
Captain, these technology transfers would advance our civilization by centuries. Some of these innovations would fundamentally change how we understand physics and engineering.
You're offering us knowledge that's essentially priceless.
Knowledge wants to be shared, Captain Chen said.
Keeping it locked away benefits no one.
Commander Zakthal found himself in the most difficult position of his military career. He had come to human space expecting to conquer a primitive civilization. Instead, he had discovered a species so advanced that they could destroy his empire without apparent effort, and who were now offering to share technology that would make the Zephyrian Empire the most advanced civilization in the galaxy.
Captain Chen, I need to ask directly, if I refuse your offer and proceed with my original mission, what will happen?
Her expression became more serious.
Commander, if you choose to attack human installations or attempt to conquer human territory, you will force us to implement defensive measures that will result in the complete destruction of your fleet and the immediate neutralization of every Zephyrian military asset in the galaxy.
And, if I accept your trade proposal? Then, the Zephyrian Empire becomes humanity's first trading partner in 3,000 years, gains access to technology that will advance your civilization by millennia, and establishes a relationship that could benefit both our species for millions of years to come. The choice was so obvious that it hardly seemed like a choice at all. Accept an offer that would revolutionize Zephyrian civilization, or face annihilation at the hands of a species that had been preparing for this exact confrontation for 3,000 years. But Zakthal was a military commander, and his instincts rebelled against accepting the word of a potential enemy.
Captain, how do we know that this isn't an elaborate deception? How do we know that you're not simply trying to prevent us from discovering that humanity is actually vulnerable?
Captain Chen nodded approvingly.
An excellent question, Commander. Would you like a demonstration?
Before he could respond, she touched her device again. This time, the conference room's displays showed a view of space outside the dreadnought. What they saw made every warrior in the room forget how to breathe.
The Zephyrian fleet was completely surrounded.
Thousands upon thousands of human vessels had materialized out of nowhere, their sleek hulls reflecting the light of the local star. They hung in space like a three-dimensional net of destruction, each one positioned with mathematical precision to maximize targeting efficiency. Stealth technology, Captain Chen explained casually.
We've been surrounding your fleet since the moment you entered our space.
Our vessels have been maintaining position around yours for the past 3 hours.
Admiral Mordisk checked his tactical sensors frantically.
Impossible.
Our sensors show nothing.
There's no way thousands of ships could be that close without us detecting them.
Your sensors show exactly what we want them to show, Captain Chen replied. Commander Zakthal, please understand, this is not a threat. This is simply a demonstration of capabilities.
If we wanted to destroy your fleet, it would have happened before you had time to realize you were under attack. On the display, one of the smaller human vessels moved closer to the dreadnought. As it approached, it became clear that the ship was significantly larger than it had appeared at a distance. What had looked like a modest frigate was actually a battleship that dwarfed the Zephyrian vessel.
Optical camouflage, Captain Chen noted.
We found that making our ships appear smaller than they actually are provides certain tactical advantages. Commander Zakthal stared at the massive human vessel as it glided past his dreadnought's viewports. The ship was beautiful in its lethality, every line of its design optimized for the single purpose of destroying enemy vessels as efficiently as possible. And there were thousands of them.
How many ships do you have? He asked quietly. In this system? Approximately 40,000. In human space overall? Several million. In hidden reserve fleets positioned throughout the galaxy?
She paused thoughtfully.
That information is classified. Admiral Kretos was studying the formation patterns of the human fleet with the eye of a professional tactician.
Captain, these positioning algorithms, they're not just surrounding us. They're positioned to ensure that if any of our ships attempt to fire, they'll be destroyed instantly while our weapons will be unable to target any of your vessels effectively.
We've had 3,000 years to study Zephyrian military tactics, Captain Chen confirmed.
We know how your ships fight, how your crews think, and how your commanders make decisions. This formation is specifically designed to counter every tactical doctrine the Zephyrian Empire has ever developed. The magnitude of the preparation was staggering. The humans hadn't just built overwhelming military forces, they had studied their potential enemies so thoroughly that they could predict and counter every possible military strategy.
Captain Chen, Veltar said quietly, why are you showing us this? If you wanted to destroy us, you could have done it without warning. If you wanted to negotiate, you didn't need to demonstrate your military superiority.
Because, Sub-Commander, I wanted to make sure there were no misunderstandings about the nature of this conversation. Commander Zakthal came here believing he held all the advantages. I wanted him to understand the actual balance of power before he made any irreversible decisions. She touched her device once more, and the human fleet began to withdraw. Within minutes, the thousands of vessels had vanished back into whatever dimensional spaces they had emerged from, leaving the Zephyrian fleet apparently alone in the void. But, as I said, this isn't a threat, Captain Chen continued.
It's simply information.
Now that everyone understands the situation clearly, we can discuss the future relationship between our species.
Commander Zakthal looked around the conference room at his officers. Admiral Mordisk was staring at his tactical displays in professional fascination. Admiral Gentel was analyzing the technology demonstrations with barely concealed excitement.
Admiral Kretos was calculating the strategic implications of what they had learned. And Veltar was trying very hard not to look terrified. Captain Chen, Zakthal said finally, I think I speak for my entire command staff when I say that we're very interested in discussing this trade proposal in more detail. Excellent, she replied with genuine warmth.
I think this is the beginning of a very productive relationship.
But, as the negotiations began, Commander Zakthal couldn't shake the feeling that this conversation was being observed by forces far beyond the human vessels that had surrounded his fleet. Somewhere in the depths of space, ancient monitoring systems were recording every word, every decision, every reaction. And, somewhere else, in the hidden heart of human civilization, beings of unimaginable power were deciding the future of both species. The Zephyrian Empire had come to conquer humanity. Instead, they were about to become humanity's first students in 3,000 years. And, across the galaxy, other civilizations were about to learn that the Silence Protocol had just been officially ended.
The age of human isolation was over.
What came next would reshape the galaxy forever. 6 months after the meeting that changed the galaxy, Commander Zakthal stood in what had once been the Zephyrian Empire's primary military academy. The massive facility on Zephyros Prime had been transformed into something unprecedented in galactic history, the first joint human-alien research and development center. Where once thousands of Zephyrian cadets had trained for conquest, now teams of humans and Zephyrians worked together on projects that would have been considered impossible just a year earlier. The fusion of human technological innovation with Zephyrian engineering expertise was producing breakthroughs that surprised even the humans. Admiral Zakthal, a familiar voice called out behind him. He turned to see Captain Sarah Chen approaching across the research floor, her small human frame dwarfed by the massive Zephyrian equipment around her, but her presence commanding respect from every being in the facility. The promotion had come 3 months earlier, along with formal recognition from the Galactic Council that his decision to accept the human trade proposal had prevented what could have been the most devastating war in galactic history. The Council had been somewhat less enthusiastic about learning that humanity had been watching them for 3,000 years, but the offer of technological advancement had quickly overcome their concerns. Captain Chen, he replied, still adjusting to the informal way humans conducted business. I trust the quantum tunneling experiments are proceeding well? Better than well, she replied with the enthusiasm that seemed to characterize human researchers. Your engineer's approach to dimensional manipulation has solved a problem we've been working on for over a century. We should have working prototypes of the new drive systems within a few weeks. The quantum tunnel drives were just one of dozens of joint projects currently underway. Human manufacturing techniques combined with Zephyrian materials science had produced hull alloys that were virtually indestructible. Zephyrian weapons technology integrated with human targeting systems had created defensive platforms that could protect entire star systems. And the fusion of human artificial intelligence with Zephyrian strategic thinking was producing military doctrines that made both species' previous approaches seem primitive. Admiral, Captain Chen continued, I wanted to discuss the latest reports from the Galactic Council. It seems that several other species are requesting permission to initiate contact with humanity. Zakthal consulted his personal datapad. The Altarian Federation, the Rigelian Alliance, and the Centauri Collective. All species that opposed our initial contact mission. Yes, though their opposition seems to have evaporated once they learned about our trade proposals. The Altarians are particularly interested in our medical technology, the Rigelians want access to our manufacturing systems, and the Centauri. She paused, a slight smile crossing her features. The Centauri want to discuss philosophy. Philosophy? Apparently, they've spent 3,000 years wondering what kind of species could convince them to implement the Silence Protocol. They want to understand human thinking. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. The same species that had originally recommended avoiding humanity was now desperate to engage with human culture and ideas. But, then, the entire galaxy was experiencing a fundamental shift in perspective. The economic impact alone had been staggering. Within months of the first human-Zephyrian trade agreements, manufacturing efficiency across the Empire had increased by 300%. Energy costs had dropped to practically nothing. And technologies that had been theoretical concepts for millions of years were suddenly entering mass production. Captain, I've been meaning to ask about something that's been puzzling me, Zakthal said as they walked through the research facility. The technological advances you shared with us are remarkable, but they represent only a fraction of what humanity is capable of. Why haven't you shared everything? Captain Chen stopped beside a holographic display showing the current state of galactic civilization. Hundreds of species were now clamoring for human contact, trade relationships, and technology transfers. The galaxy that had once feared humanity was now desperately eager to befriend them. Admiral, imagine that you discovered a species that had never seen fire. Would you immediately give them fusion reactors? I see your point. Gradual introduction prevents cultural shock and technological disasters. Exactly. We're sharing technologies that will benefit your civilizations without fundamentally disrupting your social structures. The more advanced capabilities. She gestured toward a sealed section of the facility, those require a different level of understanding.
Zachthal had wondered about those sealed sections.
Even with his security clearance as Joint Project Commander, there were areas of the research facility that remained off-limits to non-humans. The humans were clearly still keeping secrets, but, given what they had already shared, the scope of their hidden capabilities was almost frightening to contemplate.
Is there anything you can tell me about what you're not telling us?
Captain Chen considered the question carefully. Let me put it this way, everything we've shown you so far represents our basic civilian technology.
Our actual military capabilities are several orders of magnitude more advanced.
The implications made Zachthal's scales shift color involuntarily. If the weapons and defenses they'd already demonstrated were considered basic civilian technology, then humanity's true military might was beyond comprehension.
Captain, may I ask a personal question?
Of course.
Why did humanity develop such overwhelming military capabilities? Most species focus on expansion, resource acquisition, or technological advancement.
You seem to have focused entirely on becoming so dangerous that no one would dare threaten you. Captain Chen was quiet for a long moment, her expression becoming more serious.
Admiral, have you ever studied human history?
Some of it. Your species' development patterns are unusual. We're an aggressive species, Admiral. Throughout our history, we've demonstrated a remarkable talent for warfare, conquest, and the destruction of anything that threatens us. The same instincts that made us dominant on our homeworld also made us extremely dangerous once we reached space.
She activated a holographic display showing human historical data. When we first achieved interstellar travel, our immediate instinct was expansion through conquest. We looked at the galaxy and saw resources to be claimed and civilizations to be dominated.
We were, essentially, a more advanced version of what the Zephyrian Empire is today. The comparison was uncomfortable but accurate.
Zachthal had to admit that humanity's original approach to galactic expansion would have been very similar to his own empire's philosophy.
What changed? He asked.
First contact with the Centauri Collective. Their diplomatic mission made us realize something important: we weren't alone in the galaxy, and we weren't the most advanced species. If we tried to conquer our way across space, we'd eventually encounter civilizations that could destroy us. The display shifted to show tactical analyses of various galactic civilizations. So we made a strategic decision. Instead of trying to conquer the galaxy, we would make ourselves so overwhelmingly dangerous that conquest would become unnecessary. If everyone was too afraid to attack us, we could develop our civilization in peace. The Silence Protocol was your idea?
The Silence Protocol was our gift to the galaxy, Captain Chen confirmed.
We realized that our presence would destabilize galactic civilizations simply because our military philosophy was so fundamentally different from everyone else's. Most species develop weapons for expansion or defense. We developed weapons for annihilation.
She touched the display controls, showing a schematic of what appeared to be a massive space-based facility.
This is one of our Omega stations.
We maintain several hundred of them throughout human space.
What do they do?
Each one is capable of destroying every star in a sphere approximately 1,000 light-years in diameter. Zachthal stared at the schematic, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. A weapon capable of destroying stars across such a vast area would be tantamount to a genocide device that could wipe out entire sectors of the galaxy.
By the ancestors, he whispered.
Why would you build such things? Because we wanted to make absolutely certain that if anyone ever tried to exterminate humanity, they would face immediate and total retaliation.
The Omega stations are our final insurance policy. If human civilization is destroyed, they automatically activate and eliminate the civilizations responsible. The casual way she described weapons of such devastating power was somehow more terrifying than the weapons themselves.
Humanity had built the capability to destroy significant portions of the galaxy, and they discussed it as if it were simply another aspect of defensive planning.
Captain, the level of destructive power you're describing, it's essentially godlike. Which is exactly why we chose isolation instead of expansion, she replied. Admiral, imagine if the Zephyrian Empire possessed these capabilities. What would you do with them? The honest answer was too disturbing to speak aloud.
With that kind of power, the Zephyrian Empire would have conquered the entire galaxy within a few centuries. The temptation to use such overwhelming force would have been irresistible. We recognized that we were too dangerous to be allowed free rein in galactic civilization, Captain Chen continued. So we removed ourselves from the equation. The silence protocol wasn't imposed on us, we requested it. A new holographic display activated, showing current galactic political situations. The end of the silence protocol was having ripple effects throughout known space. Species that had been enemies for millennia were suddenly cooperating in hopes of gaining human favor. Trade relationships were being restructured around access to human technology. And military balances that had remained stable for thousands of years were shifting as everyone tried to guess what humanity might do next. But the galaxy has changed since then, Captain Chen observed. 3,000 years of peace and cooperation have created a more stable civilization than existed when we first chose isolation. We think it might finally be safe for humanity to take a more active role in galactic affairs. What kind of role? Guardianship, she said simply. Not conquest, not expansion, just making sure that the peace and stability that everyone has built over the past 3 millennia continues to exist. The implications were staggering. Humanity wasn't just ending their isolation, they were positioning themselves as the galaxy's protectors. With their overwhelming technological superiority, they could enforce galactic law, prevent wars, and ensure that the kind of aggressive expansion that characterized younger civilizations never again threatened established systems. Captain, that's essentially declaring yourself the rulers of the galaxy. Not rulers, she corrected. Guardians. There's a significant difference. Rulers impose their will on subject populations. Guardians protect existing systems from outside threats. A communication alert interrupted their conversation. Captain Chen activated her personal device, listened to a brief message, then looked up with an expression that mixed concern with grim satisfaction. Admiral, it appears we're about to have our first test of this new arrangement. Our monitoring stations have detected a military fleet moving toward Altarian space. The attacking force appears to be the vegan hegemony, and their intentions are clearly hostile.